If you ever worry you never make enough money to afford the things you want, it's because you're way too focused on making your first million. Instead, we should focus our efforts on the first 25,000, because this is where everything changes. So in this video, let's talk about why your first 25,000 changes everything. Number one, you focus more on subtraction rather than addition. When I was 17, I was already pretty frugal, but I went through this sort of fashion phase where I loved to buy American Eagle and Aeropostale, and these were brands that were trendy at the time. So what I did was throughout the year, I'll just add stuff to my cart and then I'll wait for a big sale like Labor Day or Black Friday. And I did this pretty frequently because they always had these fake sales running. So I would end up the year with mountains and mountains of clothes that I would barely wear. But once I reached my first 25K, I noticed that my mindset around shopping and buying things started changing in ways that I didn't even know was possible. Like buying the newest clothes lost a bit of shine and hype when I realized that it became a bit easier to afford them. And that's when I realized that, at least for me, that building wealth wasn't about buying or collecting more stuff. It was about needing and being okay with less. Not because we shouldn't or we can't buy stuff, but because material things become less of a priority compared to other things that pop up. Now, I haven't gone all Zen monk mode where I don't buy anything. I still make this list and I still wait for really big sales, but I realized that there's a bigger threshold now for me to want to actually buy something. A Chinese philosopher once said to attain wisdom, subtract things every day. And it's the same concept with wealth. After you hit 25K, we start subtracting things that not only take up physical space, but also mental space, like our toxic jobs or bad friends or obligations that drain us. Because it's at this point we start to notice that removing things actually add to our life and our peace of mind. The second point is you start understanding the difference between linear and leveraged income. My parents always taught me that if I wanted to make it, that I needed to work really, really hard. And for them, this made sense because they immigrated here with nothing but a couple of dollars, and they had to work from morning to evenings every single day, including the weekends, to be able to financially support my sisters and me. And so I basically took this equation to heart, where more hours equals more money. To the point that one of my side hustles in college was taking pictures of events in exchange for money. And I remember I would constantly sacrifice my weekend plans because I thought, okay, if I can squeeze in an extra client or an extra event, I can make an extra $100 because of this equation. But once you have 25K, you start to realize that your linear income has a cap, right? Because you can only grow this with time and effort. And there's only so many hours in a day. Even if you don't get any sleep and you micromanage every single millisecond of your day, you are still limited by 24 hours. On the other hand, leverage income over here basically has no limits because it grows with assets. Unfortunately, this is not something that they teach you in school because they want you to follow the traditional path, which is where this equation comes in. For example, I invest in an asset called SCHD, which is a dividend ETF that averages about a 4% yield per year. And when I had 25K in there, I essentially made $1,000 in passive income every year just because I was holding that investment. Now, you can generate passive income with less than 25K in that asset, but for me, at least it didn't feel substantial until the returns crossed that four-figure mark. If you want to build leverage income by investing in assets in the stock market, one of my favorite brokerage platforms, SoFi, is actually running a promotion right now. SoFi isn't sponsoring this at all, but I just like the platform because of how easy it is to use for beginners. But right now the promotion is they're giving away a free stock worth up to $1,000 to anyone who opens up an account and deposits $50. I'll leave a link down below. I don't know how long this offer is going to last, so feel free to pause the video right now, grab your free stock, and then continue watching. The point is, instead of spending more effort and time trying to increase your linear income, you should look for places where you can deploy your money to make more money with leveraged income. Number three, when you reach your first 25K, you shift from being reactive to being strategic. I used to say yes to every single opportunity that came my way because in a way I didn't feel like I had a choice to say no. When I was 15, I was looking for a job, and one of the few places that actually took me in for an interview was the local supermarket in my neighborhood. And I remember when the store manager was describing the role and the work culture and the job that I would be doing, I was forcing myself so hard to smile to the point that my cheeks were hurting because I had to seem like I was excited about this opportunity because I needed the money, even though it sounded like the most painfully boring job for minimum wage. And when he made the offer, obviously I excitedly say yes because I literally could not afford to say no. Many decisions that we make before 25K is a reaction to scarcity and anxiety. Studies show that people without much in savings, they tend to spend more than twice as much time worrying about money each week than those with even a small buffer. And it's this anxiety that bleeds into everyday life, right? Like saying yes to a lowball offer because we need the money, or not being able to sleep because we're thinking about our bills and our finances. Once I reached 25K, I started to look at opportunities and actually ask myself if this was the right one for me, instead of being forced into taking whatever move was in front of me. Like, we can plan and strategize our lives, right? We can pass on a terrible offer because we can afford to wait for the next opportunity. Now, it's not to say that I am absolutely perfect at this, because still I didn't grow with money, so I still have this innate scarcity mindset in the back of my head, even though I am much better than I was before. The point is, once you reach 25K, you finally get to ask yourself, what is the next best move, instead of saying, what is the least bad one? The next point is you have an identity shift. Many people think that money changes someone because of what they can buy when they have money, but I think the change also comes from how people start to respond to you. For example, I bought a multifamily house earlier this year and we were looking for tenants. And when my real estate agent started sending me applications with their applicants and their financial information, assuming their income and their credit score were good, I found myself that I was more likely to rent and say yes to someone who had 25K in their savings or their investments, because even if they had a financial emergency, I am more confident that they can cover the rent for the next 6 to 7 months, which should be more than enough time to get back on their feet. Obviously, the more money they were able to show, the better it was, but honestly, the marginal benefit of having more money starts to flatten out because my risk is already pretty low. Compared to someone who can just show 5K or 10K in their savings or investment accounts, if something does, knock on wood, happen, they just don't have the same financial buffer. It's the same thing with banks and lenders, like how they start viewing people, because having 25K shows just more financial stability. It's little things like this and how people respond to you, how that changes how you perceive yourself, because you have more financial access in the world, you become more confident, you become more secure, and that shows up in how you speak, negotiate, and even walk into a room. The point is, with 25K, people start to see you differently, and that causes yourself to perceive yourself differently too. Next, for better or worse, the people around you also change. When my friends and I were broke, I remember all our conversations revolved around the latest episode of The Walking Dead or some random celebrity gossip or drama. And to be fair, that stuff was fun, but it could be a bit repetitive. After I reached 25K, I started to notice that I cared a lot less about that kind of stuff, and I became more intentional with my conversations, where in addition to like sending memes and funny pictures and videos, I also sent links to podcast episodes about personal finance or money, or blog articles about financial freedom. You know, trying to introduce new topics into the group chat that I think everyone would benefit from. Thankfully, my friends were somewhat interested in this new topic of conversation, but if you start to notice that your friends constantly dismiss these attempts, then you might start attracting new friends who share your new aspirations. This point's a bit iffy, and I didn't know if I wanted to include it in this video because of the moving on from one friend group to another friend group dynamic, but curious, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I don't think it's about ditching anyone or moving on and leaving people behind, but it's just naturally you start to gravitate towards people who share your same curiosity and your interest, and in this case, it's about wealth. It's like the saying that you become the average of the people you spend your time with. The point is, once you reach 25K, you start attracting people who think about money the way you do, and that naturally changes the kinds of conversations you want to have. The next point is you start to think in percentages and not just raw numbers. When I only had 1K saved up, I barely paid any attention to people who are talking in percentages. Like, oh, we got a 8% return, because an 8% return for me was basically $80. It's a good chunk of change, but it's not like it's gonna change anyone's lives. But I started to really pay attention when I had 25K, because an 8% return on 25K is $2,000. If we play that out and we assume an 8% average annual return for 10 years, that 25K is gonna grow to nearly 54K. 25K is the point where percentages stop feeling like theory and actually feel like real life. Which is when I finally understood why rich people were obsessed over percentages like interest rates and percentage yield, because I started thinking, what can I do to get that percentage up? And this is where you want to start being a little bit extra careful. And this is speaking from experience, that once you really start getting into investing and seeing your money go up by 10%, 20 or 30%, you start getting really big dopamine hits. And this is when you start to obsess over, maybe I should work part-time, or think of quiet quitting, or going for early retirement, which then spirals into not being the most productive employee or worker out there. By the way, I go into a lot more details on how to invest for beginners in my free 5-day investing course, where you'll learn how to invest without feeling overwhelmed and how to protect your money. You can sign up by scanning the QR code here. I'll also leave a link in the description, and again, it's completely free. The next thing that changes after you reach 25K is you unlock a new third stage of decision making. There is a very big difference between not being able to do something and choosing not to. Here's what I mean, all right? So let's just say your friend decides to ask you out to lunch. Well, there are 3 stages of decision making that you get to unlock when you reach a new money milestone. The first stage is where most people fall when they have less than 10K, and I call this stage the constraint choice. Here, your decisions are restricted by necessity, because if your friends ask you out to lunch, you will think, I can't, I'm sorry, because you literally cannot. Because saying yes means giving up something else that's essential, like paying for rent or your groceries or your phone bill. See, the choice here, the decision is already made for you. The second stage is where most people fall when they have around 10K in savings, right? And I call this one disciplined choice. Here, you're not drowning financially, but money is still a bit tight. With the lunch plans, this is where you'll think, I could, but I shouldn't, right? Technically, you can afford it, but if you want to have a bigger financial safety net, skipping lunch feels more like a discipline. The third stage is where you fall into once you hit 25K, all right? This is where I call freedom choice. Here, your choice isn't constrained about necessity or by discipline because you have enough financial breathing room. Here, you can think, I could, but I would rather, right? You say yes when it matters to you, like celebrating a birthday, to recharge or to enjoy life. But when you say no, it's not because you can't comfortably afford it. It's because you genuinely would prefer to put that money towards something more meaningful to you, like investing or building out a financial goal. Here, you're choosing based on what you want and not what you fear. The point is, once you hit 25K, you move from constraint to freedom choice. Now that you know why hitting 25K changes everything, what if you can take that money and grow it like the 1%? Watch this video next where I break down the strategies I use to reach financial freedom before 30 and how you can use it too.